Hi. In today's conversation, I'd like to share a few thoughts on approaching a medical writing test. Reading a medical writing test is very different from completing the medical writing test. When we read a document, we begin at the top and work our way down to the bottom. But developing or completing the medical writing test is very different. It's not about beginning at the top of the document and working your way downwards. If you're developing a slide deck, it's certainly not about beginning from slide number one and working your way um, to the last slide. In order to develop a medical writing test and to complete that assignment, I found that the outside in approach is what's most helpful. Now, what does this mean? It means that we think about the boundaries of the task and then start filling up the gaps in between. Define the scope. Think about what information to include, what information to exclude. What is the boundary? What is the scope? What does it contain? What does it not contain? Answer these questions first, and then once the boundary is set, begin filling up the gap. Now, in order to set the boundaries, there are a few questions to ask. The first very important question is if the instructions are very clearly being followed. When instructions are provided, carefully reading the instructions alone provides such important clues on what the boundaries of this assignment are. So that's step number one. The second important question that we need to ask of ourselves is, are we truly understanding the meaning behind what is being asked for in the test? Meaning that if the test is about putting together slides, as a medical writer, it's probably not about trying to make the slides look pretty, because within a company, there is a separate department involved in making sure that the slides are following a specific stylistic format. As a medical writer, the goal is to make sure that the most important key messages are summarized on the right slides. So understanding the motive or the rationale behind each question is important. If the test is focused on writing a summary for a lay audience or writing a summary for a clinical audience, it's important to ask, are we capturing the key messages that the clinical audience need to know? Are we capturing information in the right way, which would help the layperson on the street understand the relevance of this research? How do we make this relevant to them? So understanding the key message behind the question is another important factor in defining the boundary. And the third is to always remember to emphasize quality over quantity. If the assignment or test says that we need to summarize something in 2 pages, and we've finished the summary in a little over 1 page or perhaps a page and a half, there is no compulsion to fill up that extra white space. If you need to make a point in 500 words and you've done it in 450 words, that's fine, that's great. The same thing with slides. If you needed to make 10 slides at the most and you have made your point, captured the relevant key points, the key discoveries, everything has been described and summarized neatly and meets your own standard and expectations in 8 slides or 9 slides, there is no need to fill up that extra gap just because it says so. And this is something which I learned later in the process, and it made a lot of sense to me when I reflected on something which one of my mentors used to tell me when I was in graduate school, which is a good writer is very selective about the words that they use. Good writers are selective about the words. However, a great writer knows when to stop writing. So think about that. Think about quality over quantity. Think about understanding the meaning behind the question, meaning behind what's asked, and responding to that. And of course, pay close attention to the instructions. And these 3 things are really going to help in defining the scope of the assessment, in defining the boundaries first, and then finding ways to fill in the gaps, which we're going to talk about in the next conversation. All the best.